you doing with your flow camera?
I know. I'm finally here. You're
well, nothing we've been talking about. No,
right. It just there.
No, give me a clear start.
Yeah, ma'am. All right. And good afternoon, Linda Moulton. I'm representing Sarah Munger documentary that's happening, and believe you me, she told me twice. We are honored you.
This is both confusing time and exciting time about potential that this deserves to have all elements of the world. Now, finally, that we're not alone in this universe, and that extraterrestrial biological entities and artificial intelligence are here now, have been here time, and here to know and be updated and upgraded in their knowledge.
As it's like the enemy. There's a wall of disbelief as evidence becomes so clear, and your career is into such clear evidence. We'll talk about the mutations. That's what fascinated me around Harvest. The evidence is here, but the disbelief. It's the dismiss that I want to you is why deserve the dismissal of dang near facts, full evidence, hard-coded evidence. How do you is this dismissal from facts?
Because the truth is so, it's very difficult in ways because it's so faceted, and I can give you an example. I was director of special projects at the CBS station down 1966 to 68, and there were headlines in Denver. Let me start this over. Everything was fine up until I realized that I'm giving the wrong year. I'm thinking something else. Okay, so in 1979, I was a director of projects at the CBS station in Colorado, and my beat was science, medicine, the environment, political issues in Colorado. In September of 1979, in the newspapers, radio, and television, it said, cattle found with X's that have no blood, no crack on the ground, and they were known as animal mutilations. And automatically, because of the work that I was doing and had been doing for some time, I want to get to the bottom of it. And I went to a colleague of mine who was very tied into the law enforcement of Colorado and said, is there a sheriff, a deputy that you know that I could contact and would talk to me straight about these new animal mutations that have blood and track? And he says, yeah, you need to go see Sheriff Tex Graves up in northern Colorado. And Tex Graves was one wonderful human being. He was respected by everyone. He had been sheriff for 23 years. And I drove up to where he was retiring the sheriff to a place where he was going to sell that. And that's why he was able to take boxes of color Polaroids that he had taken himself as sheriff of mutilations and let me lay out on the floor so I could see an overview of all of them. And I was in the office for an entire day talking with him and him through all of the photos that he had taken. And I'll say the perpetrator of these bloodless animal mutilations are creating outer space. It was as if my entire body hit with an electric shock. And it only happened maybe 2 or 3 times in my life, and every single time I associated it with, this is a gigantic truth, unexpected, and that impact on the rest of my life is what was going to happen. Sheriff Tex Graves told me that day, he said, let me share with you one of the cases that I had nightmares about. We got a call about 20, 30 minutes outside of the, I called up a vet, said, meet me. He said, we pulled up, here was this cow looking like it should get up. Everything looks perfect, except it's dead. I asked the veterinarian to do the necropsy right there. I wanted to watch. He said, there was not a single cut. This is Sheriff Tex Graves. There was not a single cut on the chest, the abdomen, the back of this dead animal. And the veterinarian took a scalpel and said, I'm going to go into the chest. I want to see what's here. And Sheriff said the scalpel came, the veterinarian began opening up the chest. He said, Sheriff, look at this. And he had on white gloves to protect his face and hands. And Sheriff Graves said, when he bent over with a flashlight to look at where the veterinarian had cut into this steer, his white plastic glove was very clear and had red over it. And the veterinarian said to Sheriff Tex Graves, this is tissue that covered this heart. Sheriff, look. Then had a flashlight. There is no heart in this chest, and you just watched me. I'm the only person who has been in this. There were no cuts. Sheriff, how is a basketball-sized heart removed from inside the chest of an animal without any excisions? And there's no blood, no fluid. I went to the various veins and arteries. There's no seeping blood. And that's when Sheriff Graves said, I've really never slept well since then because I don't understand it myself. But Linda, you just have to understand the perpetrators of these animal mutilations are creatures from outer space. And he said, and I want you to talk with Bill Jackson, who worked for one of the Sterling newspapers up in northern Colorado. He said he's been going out and capturing time lapses of objects that are moving in the sky. And he said, and we're seeing beams coming down from lights. And the ranchers are reporting seeing beams. He said those beams might be picking up these cows, taking them somewhere, doing all of this and putting them back. Anyway, you need to see the videos and the photographs. And that was the next thing. And I have never stopped in 45 years, since September of 1979, trying to get hard answers to how could a cow have its entire heart missing, and a veterinarian is the only person who cut into the cow and discovered that. I can jump cut now to 2025. Animal mutilations continue around this planet. They're not as many as they used to be, and they are not covered like they used to be. Between the 1979 meeting with Sheriff Tex Graves and today, I did a documentary in 1979 to 1980. It was broadcast in Colorado on the CBS station, and it was the largest audience for any project produced at the CBS station ever, before and during and now. Nothing has ever been like this before. And I remember the morning that people were coming into my office after the May 28th 1980 or May 30th, 1980 is when this was broadcast. And people were coming and to my office and saying, "You can't stop. You've got to keep investigating." And I agreed. And that film, A Strange Harvest, is the first real serious piece on the chessboard of investigating UFOs, ETs, and animal mutilations, because that year, as we unfolded into 1980, there were more and more animal mutilations, no blood, no trucks. It was clearly a phenomenon that was happening. It was all over the United States and Canada and Australia and New Zealand and England. It was everywhere. But you could talk with somebody who lived, let's say, in a neighborhood, and there's 5 or 6 houses, and they're next to each other. And there can be a mutilated cat, just like the bigger animals. And yet that was in the context of people and houses. How is this done? To this day, in 2025, April, there is no answer to all of the evidence from 79 to 2025, except the extraterrestrial, which has been linked to animal mutilations by law enforcement in many parts of the world because of eyewitnesses. In Argentina and Brazil, there have been eyewitnesses who have seen a round silver disc, see a beam of light come down, an animal enters into the beam of light and goes into the UFO, and sometime later, the body of an animal is found with ear, eye, tongue, jaw, genitals excised, no blood. Okay, the no blood part is what I decided I'm going to try to find out from medical professionals. How is this possible that you could have excisions and the heart missing and no blood? And that took me to Dr. John Altshuler, one of the best people in the world. And I laid out some of the evidence that I was gathering as a reporter at the CBS station. He was there in Denver as a hematologist, pathologist, and I asked him if he could help me. And he said, "I would really like to get to the bottom of this." So he joined me, and I started going. I'd go to his office. I would get the containers, the gloves, the labels. I would go out to a mutilation with cameras, take photographs, and do excisions, and put them in formalin solution in Tupperware, and take the tissue that I cut with a scalpel, labeled it with a wire title, put it into the container that would have a preservative in it, and I would drive it to Dr. Altshuler's lab. And one day, when I had taken him some new tissues to examine, he said, "I would really appreciate it if you would sit in that the microscope, and I want you to understand that I am now convinced that what is doing these excisions is something like a laser. But Linda, if you go back in time, there were no lasers." And then he said, "Now look," and I have photos in the big book that I did about all of this work at Alien Harvest. And the photographs show you that the excision line that does not bleed, has no fluid in it, is extremely dry. In fact, a lot of them were hard like plastic, which really puzzled Dr. Altshuler. And right there, where the excision lines are, whether it was an ear, eye, tongue, jaw, udder, whatever it was, we found this over and over, the hemoglobin was cooked and the collagen was cooked. That's high temperature, with this as the important words after high temperature: a tiny point that is so hot that it is cutting through something as thick and stiff as hide and leaving these hard, darkened edges. Dr. Altshuler said, I don't know of any technology that we are able to go out and do this. So,
Linda, if I may insert, I watched Strange Harvest, the scariest point. Like, I'm a horror filmmaker, and it scared me, and that is the part where the two farmers, male, female, had just checked the cows. And
yes.
then so it's like a thief in the night, all of this technology, and then the thief in the night, like behind their back when they looked away.
Well, I think it happened so fast that people can't believe it. And law enforcement, that was one of the things. If it is largely at night with a beam that is picking an animal up, and people in Argentina and Brazil have seen this, a cow going up in a beam. So the work isn't even done down in the dirt, but the animal is returned right to where it was taken. It's already dead. There's no struggle. There's no dirt. That's why there are no tracks. And this animal, the excisions were on a craft, and the non-humans put it down.
There was a horse in that example I gave, and it happened so fast.
Yeah, Snippy.
Snippy.
But Snippy wasn't Snippy. Snippy was a female horse lady. They got it wrong. But I go into all of that in my book, An Alien Harvest, as well. That was the famous first case in 1967 in the San Luis Valley of Colorado. And in that one, Dr. Altshuler was the famous anonymous doctor who went down to see the horse in the newspapers as labeled Lady Snippy, even though it was Lady. And Dr. Altshuler, who I would end up working with so many years later, told me the whole story about how he didn't want anyone to know that he was a pathologist, hematologist who went down to see the horse. He wanted to go and look at it and did some tissue samples. And he said, Linda, when I got down on my knees and I'm looking into where the animal has been cut, and he said, all of the major organs, the heart, the lungs, they were gone. But he said there was no sign of blood of any kind anywhere. And that is why I have spent the rest of my life, even as a professional hematologist, pathologist, trying to follow and understand this, because I don't understand how you could make such a huge incision, excision, take out organs, and there was no evidence of any kind of blood fluid, let alone the tracks of the horse himself was not there. They were 300 feet away, where it looked like the horse had been pulled up and its back feet were going in a circle, but only the back hooves. And that would fit in to the Argentina, Brazil, and other parts of the world where people have had the courage to report, I saw a beam coming down from something in the sky, and it ended up to be an animal that was mutilated.
I'm coming to you today with what, who, what, the action, who is doing it, why, and then we'll get to the next question. You've added to the what, because I did not know about the going up into the air. I just knew about the quickness and then the fact that they don't do it to humans. As far as I know, they want these animals. Still on what? Why? Well, I'm on the why now. Why are they doing it? Who is doing it? Why are they doing it? And why not humans?
After A Strange Harvest was broadcast to this huge audience at the CBS station in Denver, I was flooded from around the world with handwritten mail, books, notebooks, medical documents that were being sent to me at the station in Denver. And as I was accumulating more and more evidentiary material that this was not anything coyotes, wolves, this was something extraordinary. And by then, it was assumed by me, and as Sheriff Tex Graves had said, I'll save you some time, the perpetrators are creatures from outer space. So about 10 years after I had done A Strange Harvest, I was still investigating and working in television and a whole lot of things. But what started happening was that some people, not many, would say, and the one I remember the most because I talked with him, he was a cowboy. And he called the sheriff because he had a dead animal. And somewhere in the timeline, the law enforcement person wasn't there. But the cowhand went out to check something in the back corral, waiting for this law enforcement. And he said, came around the corner of a shed, and Linda, right in front of me was something I've never seen. It's not human. I don't know what it was, but it was about 3 to 4 feet tall. It was all gray with big black eyes. And it is where we lost the mutilated cow. Those kinds of reports began to surface more and more and more after the 79, 83, 84 time period. And the frustration of people saying, I'm afraid to report what I really saw because everybody will laugh at me and say I'm crazy. Heard a lot of that. And eventually, I got approached by people in Los Angeles from Feature Films saying, we want to cover this story. We'd like to work with you. And I personally was interested in doing it as a documentary, not a Hollywood feature, because that would keep it in the, is it real or not? And I called HBO, sent them my documentary from the station, A Strange Harvest, that won a regional Emmy. Jean Abinader was then a new director of HBO's documentary division. She said, I would very much like to meet and talk with you and see what we can do. And I flew to, I was either in New York or Washington. And I was in both of those offices. In this particular meeting with Jean Abinader, I think was in New York. And it was to have me talk and take questions from the HBO documentary and executive staff. And we had a date and we had a time, and this is really important. I had a series of different, like, attorneys, military people who were reaching out to me because of the work I was doing and the broadcast of A Strange Harvest. And one of them was in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1983. And this is where an Air Force Office of Special Investigations agent named Richard Doty took me into the Air Force Office of Special Investigations at Kirtland in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and had me look at a document and allowed me to read it with him watching me and my asking questions, that said in this remarkable document, talking about UFOs and Eisenhower and the history, it came to a sentence that said, these entities were using the materials that were coming from the animals to help them survive, was the bottom line. And it was in the context of government knowledge and then government cover-up, because the government of the United States never in any form during all of this time, for when I got into it in 1979, you could say up to this day, that we're talking in 2025, it's 45 years later, a half century. I've never given up on trying to find more and more and more, but I have always been disappointed that somebody in the United States government, at a congressional level, an executive level, at whatever level, we haven't had anybody stand up in a press conference and say the animal mutilation phenomena that has been affecting the United States since at least the 1950s and the rest of the world off and on in different timelines, it's not human caused, it's not wolf caused, it's because we have extraterrestrial biological entities interacting with our planet and using materials that they harvest. My title, A Strange Harvest, that they're harvesting eggs, sperm, chemistries, liquids from the animals and from humans. That's what I always thought eventually we would get that statement in some kind of a government press conference. And then they could say, we are trying to negotiate with them, or whatever they would say. But to date, as I speak to you on April 6, 2025, there's never once been an official discussion anywhere.
The government's job is false assurance. It's their job. When religion's job is false assurance.
And not only
the universe
have
open is crazy.
Yeah, and not only have animal mutilations continued all of this time, from 1979 up to 2025, and the going back from 1979, going back way far into the 50s at least, there were reports, and they kept being secret. So today, in 2025, what is happening that I think is a good thing and needs to have a lot more of it, the very fact that there have been congressional efforts to open up hearings, bring people in with somebody is saying you have the permission to go to Washington and at the Capitol and speak about X, Y, and Z of your military career. And as that has sort of off and on in spurts occurred from 2024, 2020, we hope in 2025, it's as if we are in a slowly unfolding, I guess you want to say, a mechanism in which to talk about all this difficult material. The mechanism is the congressional hearing, where a certain number of people have been okayed. Because here's the huge problem. All of the people who have firsthand knowledge about animal mutilations, human abductions, a variety of extraterrestrials that are here on this planet, in the moon, Mars, Ganymede, and beyond, they can't talk. They will be put in some terrible legal process and could end up in jail. So what is happening now for the first time, and I hope it continues to open much wider and faster in 2025. If the Pentagon feels like they still have control on the reins, and people like Chris Mellon, who has served in our government's defense office, is trying to help open up the truth. Animal mutilations around the world are done by extraterrestrial biological entities that also work with artificial intelligence entities, and that's the truth. And then they put it in the context of, we feel that we are going to be able to negotiate with these other intelligences. It'll be something like, you don't have to be afraid We are going to make, and this is what a lot of people think, we should make it official, introduce the ETs, that they have a metabolism problem of some sort. Whitley Strieber has talked about this as well. And that the reason for the animal mutilations is that the gray types need a certain chemistry, whether it's a specific copper or something, and they can get it from earth animals, which helps them survive. That's the current context in which people who have done a lot of study are now looking at animal mutilations as something that they might be able to open up publicly because there's a good reason of survival. But what they haven't explained, why are the gray beings, the praying mantises, the Nordics that look like Scandinavian humans, the tall whites, the blue teals, they're called, reptiles, standing up lizards, standing up alligators, this huge range. Why are they here at all competing with humans on Earth?
As a self-protecting individual, my consideration, two grown kids and whatnot, I'm think when I hear about this, and it's not hard for me to, Jamaican born, there's a lot of folklore I grew up with, so I can more easily believe things as far as a folk person, as that's true, but let me just keep doing my thinking. Do you see them, because they're working in the shadows, as respecting our sovereignty here on Earth? The fact that they sneak, or do you see that, or do you not see that, and they're just doing what they're doing? The fact that they're sneaking rather than just coming down and grabbing what they need in broad daylight, do you see anything with that?
I've always thought that the title that was used by John Keel and Jacques Vallée and others around this, Messengers of Deception, was one of the famous books, and there have been others. The theme is deception, deception, deception. To the human mind and soul, deception is always bad. And that's one of the big things that right now I think is a huge challenge, to open up the whole huge story of 270 million years or half a billion years that ETs have been fighting each other over Earth. That we are in 2025, we are just beginning to get a few honest cracks. So unloading these bigger pictures of harvest of genetic material, eggs and sperm, harvest of blood because they need the specific copper that is in, let's say, a Angus cow. There has been so much repression since World War II that it becomes hard and hard to open it up into how honest some people would like to tell the whole story now, which I think is the right thing to do. But I'm going to throw at you and your camera a sentence that stopped me in my tracks about 8 years ago. And it was from a man named William Mills Tompkins, who I was able to interview for 5 hours. And he died only a couple of years later. I think he was about 94. And he had worked for the Department of Navy in World War II because he was an idiot savant teenager, meaning he had this great talent of looking at battleships, airplanes, anything. He could look at anything, take a pencil or a pen, sketch it to scale, and the scale would be accurate. And the Navy hired him as a teenager, and he stayed there for quite a while. And he ended up working with what he said were extraterrestrials, blonde hair, blue-eyed, white-skinned Nordics is what he called them. And he said, Linda, what I'm going to say to you now, and it was in my interview studio. We did an interview for 5 hours. What I'm going to say to you now is the truth. World War II was an extraterrestrial war fought through human bodies. And I remember it was almost as if once upon a time about animal mutilations, I felt like I was hit with an electric shock. It happened again when he said those words. He passed. No one else has ever picked up the same density of historic details as William Mills Tompkins. But I think we are finally getting close to this. I have been told, and I cannot yet prove, I want to do it as evidentiary material, but it's worth putting all of this in context right now. I have been told by a person that I know his real name, real location, what he did in a very large aerospace company for a very long time, having to deal with tall whites and a variety of extraterrestrial issues.
Tall whites are the grays, tall whites. There's different alien lines.
Yeah, I keep assuming that everybody knows these different beings. We would know nothing about the tall whites if a man named Charles Hall had not written three large books about this thick a long time ago. And that is where I saw information about the tall whites for the first time, was reading his books. But just like so many things in the universe, you start reading a book that has been handed to you by somebody who says, you've got to read this because this is a big factor of what we're dealing with in the extraterrestrial. And you start reading, and then what happens? I am a reporter, I am producing documentaries, I am doing TV shows, and somebody comes to me and says, I really want you to know that I think I've had a meeting, or they came and they were 10 to 12 feet high, Linda, and they were solid white. Everything was white. The hair was white. The skin was white, like chalk. Chalk, Linda. It looks like and feels like powdery chalk, their skin. And they can have very pale eyes that might be white or gray or bluish, but they're very, very pale, and they're geniuses. They're geniuses. And some of them have been helping us in aerospace. If they're geniuses, if the government of the United States is depending upon the tall whites to help us build spaceships, deal with ETs, go out to Ganymede to see what it's really like, why? Seriously, why wouldn't our government then tell everybody the truth? That is the one thing that makes me so nervous. Here we are, 2025. I've just taken you in a fast bullet train through some of what I've investigated, of which continues to this day, which is animal mutilations and human abductions and government cover-ups in every direction. If it's true that there is a species of extraterrestrials that are referred to as tall whites because they're very tall and they are white like chalk and they feel like chalk, why can't the whole world know this? Is the government sending a signal that they're going to keep most of the secrets going forward? And we may be introduced on Mars because Elon Musk has an assignment, as I understand it, to go in a craft to get to Mars, to establish a base, and there will be coming and going of all kinds of people, probably ETs as well. But whatever is going to happen, why doesn't the US government stand up and say, we are sorry we kept this from you for so long, but we have been worrying about what the truth was. Today, we can tell you with some assurance that we are working with some of the tall whites that we consider to be geniuses, and they're helping us.
Why I believe everything you're saying instantly, like and putting it together in what I've read is the the you say the cow mutilations in our observation from 1950, TV, the inventions, the fast tracking post war, the nuclear. So much has
And
happened.
abductions
Abductions of
around the
sightings.
world of humans. And you would think that that would be enough of a trigger
Mm.
for the governments to at least have some kind of global satellite announcement. We want you to understand what is happening and why. We've got extraterrestrials on X, Y, Z, solar system and planets. We have been communicating, and it has been difficult because we felt we couldn't tell you until we had more answers. And we can tell you today that they have dependency on some things that are on Earth, in Earth life, that they need to survive. But in exchange, they are willing to take us into another dimension. They are willing to help us build crafts that can move interdimensionally. And we are beginning to move and work together. And this is the first time that we have been comfortable to tell the world.
Is it because the government would lose control from a possibly benevolent knowledge that we could all gain?
That's been said to me many times, and I think every time I jump inside my own intuitive sense, if the non-humans are not prepared to communicate with us in a way that humans could receive because they're entirely telepathic. So a press conference with them is silence. Unless, and this has happened, I've been told this, the military or the government selects a sergeant or a colonel or somebody who seems to have demonstrated that they had at least intuitive and perhaps the ability, like remote viewers, who can often get the impression of energy around them, and then they see pictures. And that if we had clarity about the relationship, the true relationship between tall whites, Nordics, different types of grays, different sizes of grays, praying mantises, the blue teals, the lizard type reptilians, the alligator type reptilians. There's a bunch. I just don't think that Homo sapiens sapien, with all of its curiosity and soul, the soul is connected to consciousness throughout the universe. I don't think that humans would ever be satisfied with just simply being told. I think that there would have to be demonstrations of introducing the ETs agreeing to do something that could be done on world television, beam up an animal, do something so that we would start finally, even if it was organized and orchestrated. These are beings in this universe like you, Homo sapien. In fact, they may have been the ones that manipulated DNA in already existing primates to create Homo sapien. That was a sentence in one of those documents, Curlin. When I think of my own self, curiosity to get and solve a mystery can overtake you for a long time and be satisfying because it's so exciting to investigate and explore. But eventually you get to a point where you want to know exactly, I certainly have been there and am now, you want to know exactly which extraterrestrials are interacting now and have been, as the number has been given to me by a man who worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. Linda, there have been competing extraterrestrials on this planet in this solar system for 270 million years. The technical age for Cro-Magnon, Homo sapiens sapien, you, me, and the current 8 billion on Earth, 45,000 years. It was only 45,000 years ago that there was a crossfade, and Neanderthal, bigger brain case. They buried their dead. Scientists in the 20th, 21st centuries have found rectangles of flowers growing, that the Neanderthal buried their dead and put flowers on it. Why were they taken out 45,000 years ago? And Cro-Magnon, Homo sapiens sapien, that was the surviving experimental species, as I've been told, were made by extraterrestrials. Why? To what end? For what reason? So, to feel comfortable, I guess is where I'm headed, about what is the actual bottom line truth of this planet's history, that I've been told that at least for 272 million years versus 45,000 for Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon to have come into being. 270 million years. Multiple ETs have come and gone on this planet in this solar system, and often they have fought each other. It doesn't make me feel good either to learn that officially people working in the government talk about how extraterrestrials have fought and competed with each other, and whole swaths like Neanderthal disappear, and we'll call it the surviving species, Cro-Magnon, Homo sapiens sapien, is the one that we are today, 45,000 years later. And now we're just trying to get the truth to open up. What else is in this incredibly huge 13.8 billion light year universe? And what are the headlines today? That astronomers are talking about, physicists are talking about, that the entire universe is connected because it's consciousness, and that the consciousness of the universe, the cosmos, its very existence automatically links in to the human brain, all brains, an infinite number of brains. And if it's true that it's a two-way street, you have the consciousness in the cosmos because you have life forms that have consciousness, and they're interacting and they're linking with each other. And the idea of this huge, gigantic, booming, buzzing cosmos filled with millions of consciousnesses, I find that thrilling. I don't find that terrifying.
World War II. I take you back there, but go on.
Yeah.
Why? Why did they do that? Are we learning together?
Why World War II?
Why
and
did they
Hitler
manipulate us? Why did alien role? I understand World War II, the alien influence. Did they learn and they're not doing that again? Or is that just with all these years? You introduced that. I'm astounded by that. Why?
You're asking a penetrating question. I ask it myself. And the truth is, I don't know what the honest answer is. I really don't. In the people who really have had depth of knowledge, and I have talked with some people, just one short one. I'm speaking at a conference. It was a large conference. I was at a podium and a mic. There was about 1,000 people in the audience. And after I ended my last sentence and everybody is clapping and screaming and all of that, I saw somebody do this. Just because I was looking down into the crowd and I saw this, and it was fast. No one would have seen it, but the person had on a white shirt, white hair, and it was the whiteness that it really was. Mostly men are not in white. And when I looked, it was just another like this, and I'm still surrounded by all of these people. But what's important, when these happen at the conferences, at the end, I'm in a bubble of sound. I have people in all directions around me that are asking, handing me things. It's very turmoil right at the end of a conference. And people like scientists, CIA, NSA, they know that if you want to talk with a speaker at a conference and give them something that might actually be real, the time to do it is right at the end of what their presentation is. And as the crowd began to clear out, I could see that the white shirt had gone back to the furthest chair at the far right of this big room. And okay, he's waiting. So I gather up my computer and everything, and I head back there. And by that time, by the time I got there, then it was not totally empty, but it was way down in people. And he motioned to just sit down next to him. And it was incredible to hear from a man who introduced himself. I can't go anywhere near that. I have to be very careful. He was a physicist. He knew a lot about UFOs and ETs. He had been working underground at Edwards, at S4, Area 51. He showed me a bunch of IDs into these highly sensitive labs. And he said, I think that you and a lot of people need to know that there's more to the reason of repressing the truth about animal mutilations, human abductions, and the current existence of multiple ETs on this planet. And then he said, I have been working underground at S4 for several years. And he said, Linda, it doesn't matter who tried to get in there. They have armed machine guns in every elevator, at every level. And unless you can produce what it is that you have been given, you probably will be shot. I never heard anybody say that before. And he said, I just want to stress that there are a bunch of us who are working really hard, and we're trying to figure out what the truth is. And we're trying to figure out which of the non-humans might be telling us the truth versus manipulating us in directions that fit them, but not us. Mm-hmm. And then he said, this is the very next thing. I remember this so clearly. Where do you live? And I said, I live in Albuquerque. What altitude? Had anybody asked me what altitude I lived at? I said, it's supposed to be, it's on Sandia. Sandia is 10,800 feet. And my understanding is that my house is at around 5,600 feet. He said, that's good. Because anybody who is 5,500 feet or under could be underwater. And that led to a discussion way too long for here. But I can give you the words that summarize the current 2025 discussions about the subject that he was highlighting for me it was the year 2014. He said, have you ever heard of the micronova? No. Do you know much about the sun? Probably not. You really have not been exposed to the concept that periodically our sun will do a supernova? No, I know nothing about this. He said, well, in my work at S4, I have spent probably the majority of my time on trying to understand what is going to happen between the sun, the earth, and the solar system. He said, now, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to fill you in on everything. But he said, try to understand that what we in the government have been trying to deal with is that we're learning information newly like you are. We just happen to have the ability to go to places you can't, to see documents that you can't. And he went through a long list and he said, I'll give you a year that I think we'll either know it's going to happen or not. And he said, by 2030. By 2030, there could be prominences from our sun scorching, that was his word, scorching places on the surface of the earth. Now, by 2025, as I speak to you today, I have had dozens of deep conversations with people who have been either astronomers, solar physicists, trying to ask about could any of that be true? And it's a very mixed issue. But as we are at 2025, which is only 5 years from 2030, what has been emerging in a slow way is that I've been asked, Linda, do you know about Earth turning into a snowball? These would be from people working for the government. Yes, I think it's happened 4 times. Mm-hmm. That snowball conditions could be linked to a micronova of the sun unleashing tremendous power that will impact this Earth, perhaps with fire. But those ingredients of the micronova will lead to the snowball. Mm. If that's true, and the extraterrestrials have been teaching us, as has been said, how do we get to 2025 and never having been told anything about a super micronova on the sun, that there could actually be in our future a snowball Earth that would eliminate gigantic swaths of the population? How many secrets should a democratic government hold close to their chest in order to keep the public in their population in the United States, for example, totally ignorant about the biggest processes, discoveries, shocks of all time? Extraterrestrials interacting with our planet, harvesting sperm, eggs, copper, blood, in order for them to survive. But what about Homo sapien?
Your question jumps me to go within. It makes me go, for me, in the sense of, and which is my next question to you, is fearful, what you're saying. And so spirit and the facts of data. And, this documentary, this NDE, and then understanding alien facts. Where are you with all the spirit talk, with the going within, with downloading and near death experience. Where are you with that as far as I headline this going within for answers rather than asking outside the tangible earth?
I've had extraordinary experiences with light and a presence that I consider to be the divine field since I was a child. I would like to share one that probably had the deepest impact of them all. When I got to be a teenager in Boise, Idaho, where I was born and raised, and was looking at junior high and high school, and remembered talking with my dad, who worked for the state of Idaho. He was director of aeronautics, that I really wanted to go to college. And my dad didn't make much money. And he said, it will be expensive. But he said, the Lions Club, they sponsor the Miss Idaho, Miss Boise, Miss Idaho to Miss America pageant. Why don't you fill out the forms and enter? And because they give out good scholarship money. So I did. And I went into the Miss Boise pageant and I won it and I got scholarship money. And then I went to the Miss Idaho, or was getting ready to go into the Miss Idaho pageant. And I asked my dad, I said, I would really like to tighten my body tighter because we wear suits. That sort of bothered me. And I said, can you take my brother, Jim, and me and my cousin, can we go up into Johnson Creek, which I loved, on the Salmon River in Idaho, the river of no return? And Dad said, well, that's a good idea. And he flew everywhere. And soon we picked out dates and we went up and landed at the airstrip. It was beautiful. And it's right at the base of this beautiful mountain that goes up, and there's the big Salmon River. It's just gorgeous. And I had been going around the airstrip, running morning, noon, and night. And then my cousin and my brother and I would go fishing and do all sorts of things and have fun together. And then I'd go back and do my sort of athlete training for the Miss Idaho pageant. And then so we did that for a week. And it was about the second to the last day. So then I was just so used to how you go on kind of automatic. I'd done my run around the airport. I started up the path that I had taken every day that went up and up and up through Ponderosa. And you would get to the top, and there were more mountains in front of you, and the land going down behind you, and the river that was coming through where my brother set up the tent, and it was just fantastic. But now I see something I'd never seen before. It looked like an orange glow, light orange glow, in one of the trees on the upper right side of the path. And I didn't have any other reaction except, well, what is that? So I'm now walking my way toward whatever this pale orange light is in the tree. And when I got there, it seemed to fade out and move this way. And I'm looking around me, and I look over to the left, and now I see more orange light. And the next thing is I clearly went into an altered state. I started moving toward that orange light, and everything went like this. If you ran a movie camera at 96 frames a second, really slow it down. And I'm very aware, not afraid. I'd never have understood. It was like something keyed me in so that I was totally just observing as I'm moving like this real slow. And I got over to the orange light. And I remember the last thing I did I raised my right hand to touch the orange light. I don't remember anything else. I'm at the bottom of the hill. From touching at the top of the hill, the next, to me, I thought it was a second. I have no idea how that occurred. I now am conscious that I am at the bottom of this long path. I'm looking out onto the airstrip. I'm looking at mountain areas around me. And every summer flower everywhere, as far as I can see, is pulsing white orchid light. And the white orchid light had orchid sparks. Everything had sparks and pulsing. And I remember I turned to my left looking, it was everywhere. And I looked up to the mountain behind me. I didn't see any separate orange light, but I know that somehow it's connected.